I'm Michelangelo for Star Licks. I'm going to be showing you 20 of my licks, musical phrases, solo concepts and techniques that I use. But before we get started, let me tell you about my equipment. I use 400-watt Marshall stacks wired in stereo, processed through a Korg dual digital delay, into a Korg modular effects pedal board where I use stereo digital chorus, stereo digital delay, compression, distortion, and I also use a Boss overdriver for a little extra distortion on solos when I need it. The guitar that I'm going to be using throughout most of the video is a BC Rich Ironbird. It's made out of alder, it's got 24 frets, a Kaler system, and 2 humbuckers. One of my backup guitars is a custom-made Dean Mach 5, and it's made out of basswood, and I like light woods on guitars. Basswood and alder are the 2 lightest woods you can get. And it's got a Kaler tremolo system, 2 humbuckers, and it's got 24 frets. And this as you can see, this guitar is pretty beat up, and it's pretty beat up because of doing things on stage like this. This guitar is my trademark. It's the custom-made Dean double axe. And don't call it a double neck. Jimmy Page uses double necks. This is called the double axe, and I'll be talking more about it later in the video. I used to teach guitar for a number of years, and the 2 questions my students asked me the most were, Michael, how do you pick so fast? And also, how do you practice? You know, how did you get your chops to where they are now? And so before we start doing the riffs, I'd like to demonstrate my picking technique. When I used to get a student for the first time, and it was his first lesson, I used to ask him the very first thing when he walked in, and because I had a lot of hot young guitar players that wanted to take lessons from me, I'd go, well, impress me, blow me away. I want to see your best riffs. And usually guitar players have their 1 or 2 intimidation riffs that they've practiced for hours, and then after that it's all over. They've blown their wad. And what I used to do is after I heard those couple, then I'd ask him again. I'd go, well, now I want you to play as fast as you can, but I don't want to hear anything that you've done before. And so they'd start playing, and I'd cut them off, and then I'd go, well, now I want you to play that lick slow. And they'd go, well, wait a second, man, I can't play it slow. I mean, you know, I'm just playing. It's spontaneous. It just happens. And what I try to tell my students, and this is one thing you can get from learning these licks, is the moral of the story is to be fast, you have to practice slow, because most people, they think to play fast, you have to practice fast. And what happens is that you practice all these licks and you don't know what the heck you're playing. And so what I did is I made them see the licks they played fast and slow it down, and when they play it slow, then you really concentrate on what you're doing with your left hand, your right hand. That's when you can get your speed down. So the moral of it is, the moral of the story is to play fast, you have to learn how to play slow. The way I pick is I position my 3 fingers on the body of the guitar between the pickups, and my hand actually glides over the top. It's almost like a phonograph needle playing on a record. Also, I use Dunlap Jazz 3 picks. They're the hardest picks that I've found, and they're the most pointed, and they're the hardest things I've found next to a rock. And other guitar picks that I've used literally started melting in my hand. They started bending around my thumb. So for my style of picking, and I think for good guitar picking, that you need a heavy pointed pick, like a Dunlap Jazz 3. Okay, there's a common denominator between guitar players who can pick fast and guitar players who can't. And all that is, and it doesn't matter if you hold your pick like I do, if you cup it like this and rest it on the bridge, if you hold it with 2 fingers, what angle you put it, put it on the strings. All that matters is if you don't move the joints in your index finger and your thumb. In other words, if you keep it rigid, you can pick fast. The guys who can't pick fast flick their thumb. They play like this, and how fast can you flick your thumb? You can't do it. And so the common denominator, if you want to play warp speed instead of impulse power, is you have to keep your fingers rigid. And what I did to test my students and just to get a good idea is I had people play a tremolo. And what you do is you start a tremolo like this. And you notice the way you're picking. Your fingers are very rigid, and then you slow it down. And now what most people tend to do is when they're playing fast and they slow it down, they change their picking style, and that's when they get into this. And the way to become a fast picker is to play and look at, when you're playing like this, I call it the PPS, the potential picking speed, and to be able to slow it down so when you're playing slow, it's the same motion, so it's very fluid. Before we start the first exercise, let's tune up. I tune to A440, and I'll start on the first string E and work my way down. This is E, B, G, D, A, and E. Here's some exercises that you can warm up with to develop your chops. Now, you've probably seen this exercise before, but it's not in just playing it, it's how you play it. And there's a lot of little things to watch out for that, if you play it the right way, can really benefit you. First of all, the exercise is basically this. Now, if you'll notice, what I do with my left hand, and this is good left-handed technique, is you keep your thumb behind the neck and perpendicular to the guitar. And you make sure that this area here, that there's a little daylight. And when you first put your fingers on the strings, what you do is this. When you start this exercise, you put all 4 fingers on the frets. And then take a look at your hand. This is good fret positioning. This is good left-handed technique. Now, everybody's hand is different. You know, some are bigger, some are smaller. But when you put your hand like this, that is the best possible positioning that your particular style and your particular hand can do. And when you play the exercise, as far as your right hand, again, make sure your fingers do not move, you know, that you don't do the flick of the thumb technique, and then you rip through the exercise. Now, also, when you play this, pretend there's an imaginary line over the frets, because everybody's fingers have a tendency to move that way. And what you want to do is make sure that you keep your fingers as close to the strings as possible. And that way, you have to make sure that you don't move a lot. And what I call it is think lazy. You know, the lazier, the less you move, the better. And I used to call it economy of motion, because the less you move, the faster you can play and the better you can do it. So it sounds like this. This is exercise number 2, and it's an exercise in triads, and it's also got a lot of parts where you have to pick one note on each string, and it sounds like this. And here it is slowed down. This is exercise number 3. Okay, this is a Dorian mode exercise. This is an A Dorian. When you have 4-finger positionings, you can only get 5 positions on a guitar. So what this does, it's a good exercise for your left hand in that you're changing positions, and your right hand in that you have to keep up with it. And so let me play it slow for you, and it sounds like this. Okay, this is exercise number 4, and it's based on a blues scale, and it's really good for keeping your fingers close, because it works on the 1st and 4th finger, and it's also good for your 3rd and 4th finger, because there's a lot of play between them. And it goes like this. And this is exercise 4 slow. Okay, this is exercise 5. Now, it's a real short riff, but what this is really good for is most of the problems that guitar players have with picking is that a lot of the riffs that they play are 3 notes on a string. And what happens is every other string, you're going to hit that string on an upstroke. And that seems to be the problem that most pickers have. So what this exercise is, in one little riff, is to work on that upstroke on another string. And it sounds like this. So why don't you open up your Starlix booklet and we'll get started with riff number 1. Okay, lick number 1 is basically can be broken down into 4 parts, and it sounds like this. That's the second part of the riff. The third part of the riff sounds like this. The fourth part of the riff sounds like this. This is lick number 2. And slow, it sounds a little like this. This is lick number 3.